After another night of Russian missiles and drones, and after dozens of civilians were killed, the Kremlin is suddenly talking about peace again. Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russia supposedly wants to end the war through diplomacy, but with Moscow's usual condition that Ukraine must agree to the Kremlin's demands.
If the regime is deliberately carrying out such inhumane terrorist attacks against children, then this represents an entirely different paradigm. Despite everything, achieving our objectives through peaceful means remains our preferred option. If the other side refuses negotiations and decisions that would shorten the path to a settlement, the special military operation will continue.
While St. Petersburg was getting ready to pompously open its economic forum, Ukrainian drones paid the city a visit. According to Russian telegram channels, one of the main targets was the Petersburg oil terminal, one of the largest oil transshipment facilities in Russia's northwest. After the strike, black smoke rose over the city and Pulkovo airport temporarily restricted its operations. And that was not the only hit near Putin's showcase city. Ukraine's armed forces also reportedly struck a Russian ship in St. Petersburg.
Ukraine's long-range sanctions are working. Last night, Ukrainian forces hit key targets inside Russia, including the Petersburg oil terminal, military targets at the Kronstadt base, and a weapons-related facility in the Tambov region. Some targets were up to 1,100 kilometers from Ukraine's border.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum is one of the Kremlin's main annual platforms, where it tries to show that everything in Russia is supposedly stable, business is working, sanctions are not hurting, and isolation does not exist. But the fire at the oil terminal ruins the Kremlin's fake picture. And that's not only that. In Michurinsk, in Russia's Tambov region, the Progress plant caught fire after drone attack. According to Ukrainian intelligence, the enterprise is linked to the production of components for the aviation and missile industry, including for Russian Ha-101 and Ha-59 missiles. Meanwhile, Reuters writes that this year Russia has brought American right-wing influencers, an American official, a German businessman, and guests from Saudi Arabia to the forum. But that's not even the main point. Ukraine is not mentioned at all in the forum's official program, like the war doesn't exist.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum, which the Kremlin presents as a Russian Davos, opens against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, slowing economic growth and confrontation with the West. Reuters writes that this year the forum is expected to host American right-wing influencers, an American official, a German businessman, and representatives from Saudi Arabia. The Kremlin says this will be the first Russian investment conference of this kind with U.S. participation since 2017 to 2018. But the war still hangs over the forum, even if Ukraine is not mentioned once in the official program. The question is, does this war end, or do we stare into a much tougher future?
At the same time, Peskov is now boasting about Moscow's ongoing contacts with Washington. He says the negotiation process over Ukraine is on pause, but this does not mean Russia has stopped talking to the Americans. So Moscow is bombing Ukrainian cities, talking about peace on its own terms, and reminding everyone that its channels with Washington remain open.
President Putin said recently in Astana that the process is indeed on pause. But this does not mean there are no contacts with the Americans. Contacts continue on a permanent basis.
After another massive Russian attack on Ukraine, President Zelensky says responsibility does not lie with the Kremlin alone. Every Shahed drone and every Russian missile contains foreign-made components. That means every strike on Ukrainian cities is made possible not only by Moscow, but also by those who help Russia bypass sanctions, supply it with money, and keep its military industry running.
Once again, Putin and his madness have claimed victory over the lives of ordinary children, residential buildings, and a clinic in Kyiv. Shaheds targeted high-rise buildings in Dnipro and, for some reason, also a car dealership with Chinese-made cars in Kyiv. A Zircon missile struck 7 buildings at once. Shaheds also hit residential buildings in Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and the Poltava region. There were strikes in the Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kherson regions. Shaheds struck the Khmelnytsky region as well. Every single one of these drones, all types of Russian missiles, cannot be produced without components imported from other countries. This means that in every such strike, there is perhaps not always conscious, but still real complicity of those who work for Russia, who supply Russia with money, who help it bypass sanctions and find not just one or two, but thousands of components without which Russian military production would simply come to a halt.
Hungary is once again putting the issue of minority rights at the center of its talks with Ukraine. Prime Minister Peter Mader said in Berlin that he is ready to meet President Volodymyr Zelensky as early as next week, if Kyiv and Budapest can reach an agreement on the rights of the Hungarian minority.
I can repeat here in Berlin, I am ready to meet President Zelensky early next week. If we truly succeed in agreeing on these fundamental human rights, using your mother tongue in a kindergarten, a school, an administration, that is not an extra thing. That is a basic human right. A country that wants to begin EU accession negotiations must respect these rights. I am very optimistic that we can resolve this dispute that has dragged on for more than 10 years.
Mader also made clear that Budapest's position on military assistance to Ukraine remains unchanged.
Hungary will not send soldiers or weapons to Ukraine, not under the new Hungarian government either.
Kyiv residents are still recovering after Russia's latest massive attack. That night, Russia launched hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles at Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. The strikes killed dozens of civilians and wounded more than 100 others. In the capital, people are clearing rubble, burned cars are being removed from the streets, and residents are returning to damaged homes, trying to understand what can still be saved. For many, it was a matter of minutes. Some had just left the impact area before the missile hit. Others survived the blast, but only later realized they were wounded.
I went outside to check on my car. It was still intact. Then the missile hit, and I lost consciousness. When I came to, I went back to my apartment. I didn't even realize I was bleeding. My head just hurt a little. Then firefighters came door to door, and one of them told me my whole head was covered in blood. That's when they put me in an ambulance and took me to the hospital. Thank God we had left that place just 5 minutes before the first strike. After the first hit, we went outside and saw the cars burning. Then the gas tank started exploding. We wanted to get to the shelter nearby, but it was already in flames, so we ran to the school. And as soon as we got there, another missile hit here.
While the Kremlin likes to portray Russia as a self-sufficient superpower standing up to the West, US senators are increasingly describing Moscow as part of a broader authoritarian bloc that depends on support from China and cooperation with Iran. During a Senate hearing, Senator Chris Coons argued that Beijing is helping both Iran and Russia pursue their military objectives. It is another reminder that in Washington, Russia is increasingly viewed not as a standalone challenge, but as a part of a larger strategic alliance involving China and Iran.
My concern at a time when the PRC has been far more aggressive than they were in previous years, centerline crossing, circumnavigation of Australia, aiding Iran and Russia in their war goals and aims, frankly, literally helping Iranians target U.S. service members. I respect the importance of our having an open negotiation and relationship with the PRC, but in the meetings you were in Beijing, did the president offer to condition arms sales to Taiwan in order to placate Xi Jinping?
While Russia continues to describe its strikes as attacks on military targets, the United Nations says the victims are once again civilians. After another night of Russian missile and drones, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attacks on Ukrainian cities. People were killed in Kyiv, Dnipro, Kharkiv, including children. Homes were destroyed and civilian infrastructure was damaged. The UN also pointed out that Ukrainian children began their summer holidays not outside with their friends, but in shelters, awakened by the air raid sirens and explosions.
Turning to Ukraine, I can tell you that the Secretary General strongly condemns the latest overnight large-scale missile and drone attacks by the armed forces of the Russian Federation on Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, Dnipro, and Kharkiv. These attacks reportedly killed at least 20 people, including 2 children, and injured more than 100 others, and resulted in widespread destruction of residential and other civilian infrastructure.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching.